No one remembered who built the living index. It was older than most civilizations, older than the Galactic Concord itself. Some said the first species to achieve spaceflight created it. Others believed it had always existed, like gravity or the cold between stars. What mattered was not who made it, but what it did. The living index classified every known species in the galaxy. Every single one. Over 4,000 entries, each one measured, weighed, predicted, and filed. Strength, intelligence, aggression, reproductive speed, resource consumption, probability of extinction. The index had never been wrong. The Concord, the loose governing body that kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart, treated the index like holy scripture. Wars were planned around it. Trade agreements were shaped by it. When a new species was discovered, the index told everyone exactly what to expect. And everyone listened. Pilu did not remember a time before the index either. He was born on Bethan, a world covered almost entirely by warm, shallow oceans. His people, the Betheni, were amphibians with 4 arms, smooth gray skin, and large dark eyes built for seeing through murky water. They were a quiet species, cataloged as Class B, cooperative, low threat, high administrative value. That classification had defined his people for centuries. They were archivists, record keepers, bureaucrats. Pilu fit the description perfectly. He had worked in the Central Archive on Station Oris for 11 years. He filed reports. He updated entries. He never questioned anything. Until the day the human file arrived, that IT came through the way most new species files did. A survey drone passing through an unremarkable arm of the galaxy had picked up radio signals from a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Standard procedure followed. Long-range biological scans, atmospheric analysis, behavioral observation from orbit. The data was compiled, run through the index algorithms, and a classification was generated automatically. Class D. Low priority, pre-space flight, self-destructive, expected extinction within 300 cycles. Pilu opened the file on a screen and read through it the way he read through hundreds of files every cycle. The species called themselves humans. They were bipedal, warm-blooded, with soft skin and no natural armor. They had no claws worth mentioning, no venom, no ability to regenerate limbs. Their senses were average at best. They lived on a planet that was, by galactic standards, absolutely horrifying. Extreme temperature swings, tectonic instability, predators in every biome, diseases that mutated faster than most species could adapt. 70% of the surface was covered in water they could not breathe in. The classification made sense. A soft, slow, short-lived species on a death world. They should have gone extinct long ago. The fact that they had not was mildly interesting, but statistically insignificant. The index predicted they would destroy themselves through war or environmental collapse well before they ever reached the stars. Pilu almost closed the file. Almost, but something caught his eye. A small data point buried in the behavioral analysis section. The survey drone had observed humans engaging in a behavior that the index flagged as anomalous but non-critical. During a natural disaster, a massive wave that struck a coastal settlement, the drone recorded humans running toward the danger. Not away from it, toward it. They pulled other humans from the water. They carried strangers on their backs. Some of them died doing it. The index had flagged this as irrational self-destructive behavior. Evidence supporting the extinction prediction. Pilu stared at the entry for a long time. He had seen thousands of species files. Predators ran toward prey. Soldiers ran toward enemies when commanded. But he had never seen a file where a species ran toward death to save individuals they had no biological connection to. No hive mind, no pack bond, no feromone compulsión. They just did it. He flagged the anomaly and sent a report to his supervisor. Director Serene was old. Not old by human standards, but old by the standards of the Orin, the crystalline elder species who had helped found the Concord thousands of years ago. Serene had overseen the Central Archive for 2 centuries. She had never seen the index produce an incorrect classification. Not once. She read Pilu's report in less than a minute and dismissed it with a single note. Anomalous behavior within predicted self-destructive parameters. No reclasificación guaranteed. Pilu read her response, looked back at the footage of humans dragging strangers out of Blackwater, and felt something he had never felt in 11 years of archival work. Doubt that he saved a personal copy of the human file. He did not know why. He told himself it was for completeness. A good archivist kept thorough records. That was all. But late that night, floating in the warm salt pools of his quarters on Station Oris, Pilu watched the footage again. A human female, small and clearly injured, wading back into the floodwater for a third time. She was shaking. She was terrified, and she went back anyway. The index said this species would be dead in 300 cycles. Pilu, for the first time in his career, wondered if the index might be wrong. Somewhere across the galaxy, on that small blue planet the Concord had already forgotten, a species that should not have survived was building something. Not a weapon, not a shield. Something the index had no category for and no algorithm to predict. They were building a ship. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 6 days before anyone acknowledged it. 6 days of a single repeating message from the Fenai colony on the fourth moon of Jera, a small agricultural settlement of herbivore aliens who had never harmed anyone. The Shal Dominion wanted the moon for its mineral deposits. The Fenai were in the way. So the Shal came with warships and soldiers, and the Fenai sent their distress call to the Galactic Concord, the same body that had promised to protect them. Admiral Goreth received the signal on the bridge of the Concord dreadnought unyielding. He was Toll, born on a planet with 3 times standard gravity. His species was built like walking boulders. Dense bones, thick skin, muscles that could crush metal. The Toll were classified as Class A military assets. The Index said they were among the most effective combat species in the galaxy. Goreth had never lost a battle that he read the Fenai distress call, checked the Index, and made his decision in under a minute. The Fenai colony was small. 63 individuals. The Shal force surrounding the moon numbered over 2,000. The Index classified this situation as acceptable loss. Intervening would cost more than the colony was worth. That was not cruelty. That was math. Goreth filed his response, denied the request for aid, and returned to his patrol route. He did not know that a small human vessel was listening to the same frequency. The ship was called the Drifter. It was not a warship. It was barely a ship at all. A converted cargo hauler with a patched-up faster-than-light drive that the crew had built themselves because no one in the galaxy had expected humans to figure out FTL travel for at least another 2 centuries. The Index had been very clear about that. Humans were too primitive, too divided, too busy fighting each other. The Index was wrong. Captain Nadia Ose sat in the pilot's seat and listened to the Fenai signal. She was 34 years old, born in Accra, raised on 3 continents, and had volunteered for the first deep space exploration mission because she wanted to see what was out there. Her crew was small. Rudo, her engineer, was a quiet man from Harare who could fix anything with wire and patience. Anika, the medic, was from Hamburg and had spent 5 years with disaster relief teams before joining the space program. 3 humans in a tiny ship held together by stubbornness and duct tape. Nadia played the Fenai signal again. She did not understand their language yet, but she understood the tone. Fear, desperation, a plea that no one was answering. She looked at Rudo, then at Anika. Neither of them said a word, but Nadia saw the answer on their faces. She turned the Drifter toward the fourth moon of Jera. The Concord detected them immediately. A hail came through from Goreth's dreadnought, translated roughly into English by the Drifter's basic computer. Unidentified vessel. You are entering a restricted conflict zone. Withdraw immediately. This situation has been assessed. No intervention is authorized. Nadia opened a reply channel. This is Captain Nadia Ose of a human vessel Drifter. We received a distress signal from the colony below. We are responding. There was a pause. Then Goreth's voice returned, slower this time, as if he was speaking to a child. The situation has been classified as acceptable loss. The species on the surface is not strategically significant. You are Class D. You have no standing in this sector. Withdraw. Nadia muted the channel. She looked out the viewport at the small gray moon below. then at the ring of Shawl warships surrounding it. Insectoid cruisers with jagged hulls and weapons that could tear the drifter apart in seconds. "How fast can we land?" she asked. Rudo checked his console. "If we drop hard and skip the standard approach, maybe 4 minutes. We will not be comfortable." Anika grabbed the medical kit. "Everything we have." Anika was already moving. Nadia unmuted the channel. "Concord vessel, we acknowledge your assessment. We respectfully disagree. Drifter out." She cut the transmission, pushed the throttle forward, and aimed straight for the moon's surface on the bridge of the unyielding. Gorith watched the tiny human ship dive through the Shawl blockade. It was so small and so fast that the Shawl guns could not track it properly. It slipped between two cruisers, took a glancing hit that burned off a chunk of its hull plating, and disappeared into the moon's thin atmosphere, trailing smoke. Gorith stared at the screen. In 200 years of military service, he had never seen anyone fly into an acceptable loss zone. The math was clear. 3 soft, fragile creatures with no weapons, no armor, and no support had just thrown themselves into a situation that the most advanced predictive system in the galaxy said was already over. "They will be dead within the hour," his tactical officer said. Gorith said nothing. He pulled up the index entry for humans. Class D. Self-destructive. Expected extinction within 300 cycles. He read it twice. Then he did something he had not done in a very long time. He ordered his communications officer to keep the channel to the 4th moon open. Not to help, just to watch that on the surface. The drifter hit the ground hard enough to crack its landing struts. Nadia kicked the hatch open, stepped into thin cold air that smelled like burnt metal, and saw the Finai for the first time. Small, soft-furred creatures with wide, terrified eyes, huddled in the ruins of their only settlement, 63 of them, waiting to die. Nadia knelt down in front of the nearest one, a trembling youngling no bigger than a house cat, and said the first words a human ever spoke to an alien species. "Hey, it is okay. We are here to help." The Shawl gave them 12 hours. "Not our mercy." Their ground commander, a tall insectoid with black armored plates and 4 blade-like arms, simply did not consider 3 soft aliens and a group of trembling herbivores worth rushing for. The colony would fall when he decided it would fall. There was no hurry. That was his first mistake. He gave humans 12 hours. Nadia did not sleep. She walked the perimeter of the Finai settlement, which was little more than a cluster of low-domed shelters built from dried mud and woven grass. The Finai were gentle creatures. They had no weapons. They had never needed them. Their entire culture was built around growing food and sharing it. The index classified them as Class E, the lowest possible grade. No strategic value. No military capability. No reason for anyone to care if they disappeared. But Nadia cared. She could not explain it in a way that would satisfy an algorithm. She just did. Rudo started working before the dust from their landing had settled. He pulled apart sections of the drifter's damaged hull plating and dragged them across the settlement. The Finai watched him with wide eyes as he hammered the metal sheets into angled barriers around the settlement's only entrance. He rewired the drifter's communication array into a network of motion sensors using parts from the ship's backup systems. It was ugly work. Nothing matched. Wires stuck out at odd angles. But when he was finished, nothing could approach the settlement from any direction without them knowing that a Finai elder, a small creature with silver fur and slow, careful movements, approached Rudo while he worked. It spoke in a language the translator could only partially decode. Something about the metal. Something about why. Rudo wiped grease from his hands and looked at the elder. "Because nobody else is coming," he said. "So we make do with what we have." Anika set up a medical station inside the largest shelter. The Finai had injuries. Burns from Shawl weapon fire. Broken bones from collapsed structures. A youngling with a gash across its side that had been bleeding for 2 days because no one knew how to treat it. Anika cleaned and stitched every wound. She used half the drifter's medical supplies in the first 3 hours and did not hesitate. Then the first Shawl prisoner arrived that a scouting pair had gotten too close to the sensor perimeter. Rudo's motion alarm went off. Nadia went out with nothing but flashlight and found 2 injured Shawl soldiers tangled in wreckage from their own damaged skimmer. One had a cracked thorax plate. The other could not walk. Nadia dragged them both back to the settlement. The Finai were terrified. These were the creatures that had burned their homes and killed their people. But Nadia brought them to Anika's medical station and said, "Fix them." Anika looked at the insectoid soldiers, looked at the frightened Finai around her, and got to work. She treated the cracked thorax with a binding agent meant for human ribs. She splinted the other soldier's leg with strips of hull metal. The Shah watched her with their compound eyes and did not move. They did not understand what was happening. In the Dominion, captured enemies were eaten. Word reached the Shah ground commander within hours. His scouts had been captured. He expected to find their remains. Instead, he received a transmission from the settlement. A calm human voice. "This is Captain Nadia Osei. Your soldiers are alive. They are receiving medical care. I am coming to speak with you. I will be unarmed." The Shah commander did not respond. He assumed it was a trick. No species walked unarmed into an enemy camp. The Index would have agreed with him. Nadia walked out of the settlement alone as the sun dropped below the horizon. The thin atmosphere turned the sky a deep orange. She crossed open ground for 20 minutes, visible to every Shah gun emplacement on the ridge. She carried nothing. She wore no armor. She kept walking. She reached the Shah camp and stopped at the entrance. Soldiers surrounded her. Blades hovered inches from her skin. The commander approached and looked down at her. He was twice her height. Nadia did not flinch. She said, "You want the minerals under this moon. The Fenai do not use them. They do not even know they are there. Let me help you negotiate an extraction agreement that lets them stay. Nobody else has to die today." The commander stared at her for a long time. Then he said, through the translator, "You are 3. We are 2,000. Why do you speak as if you have power here?" Nadia looked up at him and said, "Because I'm still standing here." The Shah did not attack that night. For the first time in the history of the Dominion's expansion campaigns, a ground assault was paused because of a conversation 40 light-years away. On Station Oris, Pilu watched the footage that Concord surveillance drones had captured. He watched Rudo build defenses from scrap. He watched Anika treat enemy soldiers. He watched Nadia walk alone into a camp of 2,000 and talk that he opened the Living Index and searched for a classification that fit what he was seeing. Strength. No. Intelligence. Partially. Aggression. No. Diplomacy. Closer, but not right. There was no category for what these humans were doing. The index measured what species could do. It measured power and speed and threat. It did not measure the willingness to walk unarmed into the dark because someone needed help. Pilla began writing a new report. This time, he did not send it to Serene. He sent it directly to the Concord Council. The subject line read, "The index has a blind spot." The council chamber on Station Oris could hold representatives from 300 species at once. It was a vast circular room carved from the station's core, with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central platform. Light came from bioluminescent panels that shifted color depending on the mood of the debate. Today they were a deep, unsettled amber. Every seat was full. Pilu's report had done what 11 years of quiet archival work had never done. It had made people pay attention to him. The footage from the fourth moon of Jera had spread through Concord communication networks faster than any official broadcast. 3 humans. A wrecked cargo ship. 63 herbivores saved. 2 enemy soldiers treated and returned. A ground assault halted by a single unarmed woman who walked into a camp and talked. The council did not know what to do with any of it. Ambassador Dallin spoke first. He was Orin, one of the elder species. His body was made of layered crystalline structures that caught the light and scattered it in patterns that other Orin could read like facial expressions. Right now his patterns said caution. "The humans must be quarantined," Dallin said. His voice resonated through the chamber like a bell struck underwater. "They are unpredictable. The index classified them as self-destructive, and their behavior on Jera confirms this. They throw themselves into danger without calculation. A species that cannot be predicted cannot be trusted." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the upper tiers. Then Pilu was called to the central platform. He had never spoken to the council before. He was a junior archivist. His species was classified as administrative support. He was not built for this. His 4 hands trembled as he activated the display screen behind him and pulled up the human file. The index classified humans as Class D. Pilla began, his voice smaller than he wanted it to be. Self-destructive. Expected extinction within 300 cycles. But I have been studying the data, and I believe the classification is wrong. Not because the data is wrong. The data is accurate. Humans are fragile. They're short-lived. Their planet is one of the most hostile environments we have ever cataloged. Everything the index measured is correct. He paused. The chamber was silent. The problem is what the index did not measure. He brought up the footage. Nadia walking into the Shaw camp. Anika treating enemy wounded. Rudo building defenses from scrap metal and wire. The Fenai youngling, stitched and bandaged, sleeping safely for the first time in days. The index measures strength, speed, intelligence, aggression, resource consumption, and reproductive rate. It uses these variables to predict behavior. For 4,000 species, these predictions have been accurate. But humans do not behave according to these variables. They're not the strongest. They're not the fastest. They're not the smartest by our metrics. And yet they did something that no other species in the index has ever done. They intervened in a conflict that had nothing to do with them, at enormous personal risk for no measurable gain. Dallin interrupted, which is precisely why they are dangerous. A species that acts without rational self-interest is a species that cannot be modeled. With respect, Ambassador, Pilu said, and he was surprised to find that his voice had stopped shaking. The question is not whether they can be modeled. The question is whether our model is missing something. He pulled up one final data point. The behavioral anomaly he had flagged months ago. Humans running into a flood to save strangers. The index has no variable for this, Pilu said. It has no category for a species that will die, for individuals it has never met. Not because of hive programming, not because of genetic obligation, not because of command structure. They do it because they choose to. Every time, even when it will kill them. The chamber was quiet for a long time. Then a voice came from the military tier. Gorath, the Toll Admiral who had dismissed the Fenai distress call, who had watched the drifter dive through the Shaw blockade and called it suicide. He stood slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across 3 rows of seats. I watched them, Gorath said. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. I watched them fly into that blockade in a ship made of scrap. I told my tactical officer they would be dead in an hour. That was 47 days ago. They're still alive. The Fenai are still alive. The Shaw have not fired a single shot since the human female walked into their camp. He paused. I have fought wars for 200 years. I have never seen anything like it. The chamber erupted into debate. Some demanded immediate quarantine. Others wanted to send research teams. A few smaller species, ones who had been ignored or written off by the index for centuries, said something that changed everything. They asked, where are the humans? Can they come to us too? The question spread. Within days, it reached colonies and outposts across Concord space. Species that had been classified as acceptable loss. Species living on the borders where the Concord's protection did not reach. Species that the index had decided were not worth saving. They all asked the same question. Where are the humans? Pilla stood on the observation deck of Station Oris that night, looking out at the dense field of stars. Somewhere out there, 3 people in a broken ship had done what the most powerful governing body in the galaxy had refused to do. He did not know what would happen next. The council was divided. The index was being questioned for the first time in its existence. The galaxy was shifting in ways that no algorithm had predicted. And it had all started because one woman knelt in the dust and said, "We are here to help." They came in ships that looked like they had been assembled by children. Patched hulls, mismatched engines, navigation systems held together with improvised wiring and sheer determination. The Concorde's deep space tracking stations picked them up one by one, then in pairs, then in groups that kept growing week after week. They were not warships. That was the part that broke every prediction model the Concorde had. The first wave was medical. Small frigates packed with supplies, staffed by doctors and nurses who had volunteered across the galaxy, because they heard someone needed help. They showed up at refugee corridors along the Shaw border, where displaced species had been drifting in broken transports for months. The Concorde had classified these refugees as managed decline. No resources allocated. No rescue planned. The humans docked with every transport they could reach. They treated infections with medicines designed for human biology that somehow worked well enough on 6 other species. They shared their food. They held dying aliens they had never met and stayed with them until the end. The second wave was engineering. Construction teams with heavy equipment that looked ancient by galactic standards. They landed on colony worlds that had been damaged by Shaw raids and started rebuilding. Not with advanced Concorde technology, with concrete and steel and sweat. They worked 18-hour days in atmospheres that burned their lungs and gravity that made their bones ache, and they did not stop until the shelters were standing again. The third wave was agricultural. Humans who grew food for a living, who brought seeds from Earth and figured out how to plant them in alien soil through trial and error and stubbornness. They taught the Finai new irrigation techniques. They showed a silicon-based species on a desert moon how to build greenhouses from salvaged materials. They failed more than they succeeded, and they kept trying anyway. The Concorde did not know how to respond. The Living Index had no protocol for a Class D species that spread across the galaxy, not through conquest, but through kindness. There was no threat to counter, no invasion to repel. Just humans showing up where they were not expected and doing things that made no strategic sense. Director Serene watched the reports pile up on her desk and felt something she had not felt in 2 centuries. Uncertainty. She called Pilu to her office. He came expecting a reprimand. Instead, she turned her screen toward him and showed him the latest data. Human activity across 47 sectors. Medical aid, construction, agriculture, education. None of it requested by the Concorde. None of it authorized. All of it free. You were right, Serene said. The words seemed to cost her something. The index did not account for this. Pilla did not gloat. He was not built for it. He simply asked, "What do we do now?" "I do not know," Serene said. "And that terrifies me." On the Toll industrial moon of Garath, a mining collapse trapped 200 workers underground. The tunnels were unstable. The atmosphere was toxic. Toll rescue protocols classified the operation as high risk, low probability of success. Standard procedure was to seal the tunnels, recover the bodies later, and file the loss report. Admiral Gorath was visiting the moon on an inspection tour when it happened. He stood at the sealed tunnel entrance and listened to the faint tapping of trapped workers below. His own protocols told him there was nothing to be done. Then a human ship landed at a crew of 12. Engineers and paramedics. They unloaded equipment, suited up, and started cutting into the sealed entrance before anyone gave them permission. Gorath ordered them to stop. The lead engineer, a woman with dust in her hair and burns on her arms from a previous job, looked at him and said, "There are people down there. The tunnels are unstable," Gorath said. "You will die." "Maybe," she said, "but they will definitely die if we do nothing." She went in. Her crew followed. They worked for 14 hours in collapsing tunnels filled with gas that their suits were not fully rated for. 2 of them were injured by falling rock. They kept going. When they finally broke through to the trap chamber, they found 168 toll workers still alive. Gorath watched them carry his people out of the ground. Toll workers twice their size, cradled in human arms, breathing clean air for the first time in days. The humans were exhausted. Some of them were bleeding. They were smiling. Gorath had conquered worlds. He had commanded fleets that could crack planets. He was the most decorated officer in the Concorde military. And he stood at the mouth of that tunnel and could not speak. Across the galaxy, the Shaw Dominion made a decision that stunned every intelligence analyst in the Concorde. They sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth. Not to threaten, not to demand, to ask questions. The Shaw commander from the 4th moon of Jera, the one who had paused his assault because a human woman talked to him, had sent a report to the Dominion's ruling council. The report contained a single recommendation: study them. They are something we have not seen before. Serene presented her proposal to the Concorde Council the following week. She stood where Pilu had stood, on the central platform under amber light. and said what needed to be said. The living index must be rewritten, not updated, not amended, rewritten from the foundation. Because if it was wrong about humans, then it is wrong about every species we have ever classified as expendable. Every acceptable loss, every managed decline, every Class D and Class E species we filed away and forgot. She paused. We did not just fail to predict humans. We failed to see what they showed us about ourselves. The vote was called. The chamber held its breath. The vote was close. Closer than it should have been. For 3 days, the council argued behind closed doors while the galaxy waited. Species that had never spoken to each other sent messages of support. Colonies on the outer rim, places the Concord had classified as too small and too far away to matter, broadcast their own votes into open space, even though they had no legal standing to do so. The message was the same everywhere. Change it. Rewrite the index. We are tired of being told we do not matter. On the fourth day, the vote passed. 1,212 in favor. 1,109 against. A margin so thin it barely existed. But it was enough. The living index, the system that had governed galactic civilization for longer than anyone could remember, was formally marked for retirement. Pillow was appointed to lead the project that would replace it. He stood in his small office on Station Oris, staring at the official notification on his screen, and did not know whether to feel proud or terrified. He was a junior archivist. He filed reports. He had never led anything. But Serene had recommended him, and the council had agreed. And now the quiet amphibian from Bethen was responsible for building something new from the ashes of something ancient. His first act was to invite Nadia Ose to address the full galactic concord. She almost did not come. The drifter was in bad shape. Months of running rescue operations and landing on hostile moons had pushed the old cargo hauler past its limits. Rudo had replaced so many parts that he joked the ship was more alien than human now. Anika had run out of medical supplies twice and had started learning alien medicine to fill the gaps. They were tired, all three of them, but Nadia said yes. Because someone asked, the council chamber was full again when she walked to the central platform. She was shorter than almost every being in the room. She wore the same flight suit she had worn on the fourth moon of Jera, patched and faded, and still carrying a burn mark from the Shaw blockade. She had no notes, no prepared speech, no advisors. She stood in the light and looked up at 300 species watching her. Crystalline Orin, who had lived for millennia. Massive Toll, who could crush her with one hand. Delicate winged beings from gas giant moons. Shaw representatives who had come for the first time in the Dominion's history, their compound eyes fixed on the small, soft creature who had walked into their camp alone. Nadia took a breath. I'm not a diplomat, she said. I'm not a scientist or a soldier or a politician. I fix cargo ships and fly them to places that need help. That is all I know how to do. The chamber was silent. You built a system that measured everything. Strength, speed, intelligence, resources. And based on those measurements, you decided who mattered and who did not. You decided which species were worth saving and which ones were acceptable losses. And by your measurements, you were right. The math worked. The predictions held. For thousands of years, the system told you exactly what to expect. She paused. Then you found us. And nothing we did made sense to you. We are not strong. We break easily. We get sick. We die young. Our planet spent 4 billion years trying to kill us with everything it had. Ice ages, plagues, predators, earthquakes, floods. And you looked at all of that and decided we would destroy ourselves. Your system said we were already dead, just too stupid to know it. A few sounds from the upper tiers. Not quite laughter. Something closer to discomfort. But here's what your system missed. Our planet did try to kill us. Every single day. And we survived. Not because we were the biggest or the fastest or the smartest things on our world. We survived because when the flood came, we pulled each other out of the water. When the ground shook, we dug each other out of the rubble. When winter came and there was not enough food, we shared what we had. Even when it was not enough. Even when sharing meant we might not make it. Her voice was steady. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. You build an index that accounts for power and territory and survival. But you never build a category for the thing that kept us alive. You never measured it because you cannot put it in an equation. It does not fit in a file. She looked at Gorath, at Pilu, at Serene, at the Shal envoy who had traveled across the galaxy to sit in this room. It is love, not the soft kind, not the easy kind, the stubborn, stupid, irrational kind that makes a person run into a fire for someone they have never met. The kind that looks at impossible odds and says, someone needs help, so I am going. The kind that your system will never be able to predict because it does not follow logic. It follows something older and deeper and harder to kill than anything your index ever measured. Silence. Absolute silence. 300 species. Thousands of individuals. Not one sound. Gorath stood first. The massive Toll Admiral rose from his seat and said nothing. He just stood. Pilu stood next. Then Serene. Then a row of Fenai delegates who had been given seats for the first time in their species' history. Then the Shal envoy, slowly, uncertainly, but standing all the same. It spread like a wave. Tier by tier, species by species, until the entire chamber was on its feet. The living index was retired that day. In its place, the Concord began building something new. Not a catalog, not a ranking system, a promise. No species gets written off. Nadia walked back to the drifter. Rudo was waiting by the hatch, wiping his hands on a rag. Anika was inside, restocking the medical bay with supplies 3 different species had donated. So Rudo said, "Where to next?" Nadia looked up at the stars through the docking bay viewport. Somewhere out there, someone was sending a signal. Someone was waiting. Someone needed help, she smiled. Wherever they need us.